Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank you and Ranking Member Huffman for holding this hearing today and bringing up key legislation like the American Conservation Enhancement Reauthorization Act. This bill is incredibly important. When its original inception came in 2020, it was all about making sure that we consolidated efforts to do things like enhance and clean up the Chesapeake Bay, one of our national treasures, to make sure, too, we looked across the spectrum about our natural resources across the country. We know how incredibly important this is. It's a generational advancement. It really is, too, about not just getting the policy right, but making sure that the resources get to the right places, making sure that they're effectively used. We know that making sure that we have conservation programs that continue to preserve wetlands, the nurseries for all the folks, or for all the things that we enjoy, or that folks enjoy in these areas, efforts to reduce pollution, to make sure we understand the latest technology that can do that, increasing recreational opportunities across the spectrum. All these things are the values that we derive from our natural resources. Title I of this bill includes important programs like the North American Wetlands Conservation Act, better known as NAWCA, that's done an incredible job in conserving and preserving millions of acres of critical wetland habitat for nesting and wintering for our waterfowl and other critical species. The National Fish and Wildlife Foundation Establishment Act, better known as NIFWIF. Lots of grants are given out with NIFWIF through the years for some really important efforts that occur at the local level. It takes great ideas at the local level and puts resources there to make sure things happen on the ground that actually enhance and conserve our natural resources. The Chesapeake Bay program, which is a marquee program about how you bring states together, how you look at science-driven efforts to make sure we improve water quality, that we improve habitat, that we improve populations of critical species like crabs, oysters, and finfish. The Chesapeake Bay Initiative Act of 1998 to make sure we put the proper policy perspectives across the different areas of responsibility. This is an interstate pact. We have states involved, we have local governments involved, we have the federal government involved. We want to make sure that there's coordination and lack of duplication of resources. We want to make sure resources are used in mutually exclusive ways that get the maximum benefit out of the dollars spent. Also, the Chesapeake Watershed Investments for Landscape Defense, better known as the WILD Act. Very important, too, to make sure we preserve what makes the watershed special, and that is the uniqueness of its landscapes. Those things, I think, are at the very heart of this bill. There are other things, too, that don't necessarily make the headlines, but are equally as important, things like the Chronic Wasting Disease Task Force. We know deer populations, mule deer populations, elk populations across the United States suffer through these epidemics, and many times these populations are taken to precariously low levels in geographic areas. This studies how do we make sure that we understand the disease, how do we manage it at the very early stages to keep it from being widespread. It takes these populations years to recover from these massive outbreaks of disease. We want to make sure we're getting those things right. The Title II provision is the Fish Habitat Conservation Program through partnerships. This is an incredibly important program also that partners with local governments, with state governments on things we can do to preserve critical fish habitat. We all go back to those critical habitat places where we have nurseries for our fish to spawn, for fish fry to grow, to escape predation and make sure they can grow to be spawners again, to make sure we have healthy populations, to make sure we have good biomass across all spawning classes, to make sure we have things like fecundity, that is the success of those eggs hatching, actually turning into an adult fish. Those things are incredibly important. You have to have habitat to do that. You have to conserve that habitat. You have to make sure we enhance that habitat. You have to make sure, too, you're coordinating across government entities. This bill brings together a large plethora of programs that have shown to be incredibly successful. This effort is to make sure that we authorize this, that we reemphasize the things that we can do together, the importance of this habitat, the importance of marshaling resources in the most effective way possible. This is a great example of a bipartisan effort that has worked incredibly well, and where we can do even more in the years to come to make sure that we are conserving not just the habitat, but the things that we treasure that rely on this habitat. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.